Good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. This is our Lunchtime Wednesday Devo. It's the last one of July. We're glad you're able to join in and watch with us. I'm Pastor Adam, and we're going to be looking at a story today that we're all very likely familiar with, the story of Noah and the ark, and the world that he lived in, and how God gave him some very simple but yet complex at the same time commands to walk out and to obey the Lord in. And oftentimes you think of the story of Noah and Noah's Ark, and we were all taught that story, when we were children, and there's pictures of the little giraffe sticking up out of the Ark, and the little animals coming 2 by 2, and it's all cute, and all that stuff, and typically we think of mostly the animals of the story, and it's a story that's so ingrained in us that often we don't think of it as a maybe useful passage of the Bible to pull from to apply to our lives today. But actually there's so many great things with the story of Noah and things that we can pull from and apply to our lives today, because Noah lived in a very, very sinful world, so much so that it says in Genesis that the world that God had created grieved himself, and he regretted even making it, which is a very, very strong statement, a very strong verse in Genesis. But we're living in a very sinful world today, and so we can take the way Noah reacts and the commands he's given and how he responds in his faith and apply those principles to our lives today. So that's what we're going to do. So in chapter 6 of Genesis, God is kind of laying out what's going to happen for Noah. And he's giving him commands about how he should build the ark and what's going to happen when the animals come. And he's kind of just laying out the plans of what's going to happen. Gives him all these things. And God is talking and giving Noah all these commands. And at the very end of Genesis 6, verse 22, it just ends with a very simple verse. It says, Noah did everything just as God commanded him. And so I think that's the key verse of chapter 6, really. You read through all the really, really interesting things of chapter 6 about the different types of animals and his family and all these things, and it comes down to Noah did everything just as God commanded him. Back in verse 9, it says that it was the account of Noah and his family, and it said that Noah was a righteous man, and he was blameless among the people of his time as he walked with God. Later, Sailhamer aptly correlates these words about Noah with the description of Enoch as well in Genesis chapter 5 earlier, actually, in verse 22 through 24, who twice said that he had walked with God. And he went on to say, the picture of Noah that emerges from the flood story really becomes a model of the kind of life that finds grace in the sight of God because of the faith that Noah had. Noah obviously had an incredible faith in order to do what he did and carry out the commandments of God that God had given him. It was a picture of simple obedience to God's commands and trust in his provision. Noah lived in extremely uncertain times, and he was a righteous man surrounded by sinners just everywhere. It said that he was one of the few, if not one of the only, faithful and righteous men among everyone in his city. So it's not really difficult to see how the author of Hebrews back there concludes that Noah was a man of faith. It reads that in Hebrews chapter 11, verse 7. It says, by his faith condemned the world and became heir of the righteousness that comes by faith. And that's talking about Noah. And then it says, for we see that his faith in action throughout Genesis 6 and 7 was his simple obedience. So Noah's obedience didn't just come through his willingness to be obedient. Noah's obedience came through the strong faith that he had in the Lord. He knew that he could trust him, even though this plan might have seemed absurd, Noah had a very strong foundation with the Lord, a very strong relationship, and a very strong faith. And out of that faith came his just easy obedience to what would have seemed to be kind of an absurd plan that God had commanded him to do. So as I quoted above, chapter 6 concluded with a commentary. Noah did everything just as God commanded him. And then again in chapter 7 verse 5, we read, "And Noah did all the Lord commanded him." And twice in this chapter we read, "As God had commanded Noah." That was in chapter 7 later in verses 9 and 16. So what is interesting in all of this narrative throughout chapter 6, chapter 7, God's declaration of the flood, his command to Noah to build the ark. Noah enters the ark, the description of the floods, the animals, the exit from the ark, throughout all these details, and what is really a long story, you never once hear Noah respond or reply or say any words, really, throughout all of that story. It really isn't until the end of chapter 9 that we see the first record of Noah even speaking. But we do witness from chapter 7 up until that point, what we do witness is Noah acting in obedience to God's commands, simple obedience. Now maybe Noah did have something to say, maybe he did have a simple reply when God commanded him these things, but it wasn't recorded, and so it must not have been significant enough. Obviously Noah wasn't acting in defiance of the Lord. He didn't complain about the commands that the Lord had given him to do. He just acted in simple obedience, and that is something that we don't see a lot in our day, is just simple obedience. There is really a lot that's interesting in the story of Noah's Ark. You know, you think about the animals, the size of Noah's Ark that he built, the extent of the flood. It's really a crazy story when you think about it, and all the awesome details that go into the story of Noah and his family building an ark over the years, getting on the ark, the earth floods, and they come out of it alive with all the new animals to start the new world. However, amongst all those details, I think that God makes it clear that above and beyond all the details of the cool story of Noah and his ark, the lesson that comes out of it and that sticks out of it for me is very, very simple. It's just to trust and obey. And that trust and obedience comes out of a strong faith in the Lord and a strong relationship in the Lord. If you want to experience God's blessings in your life, it really all boils down to trusting Him and obeying Him, and remembering that that trust and obedience comes from a foundation of an authentic walk with the Lord. Noah's obedience to the Lord didn't just come randomly. He wasn't walking away from the Lord and one day God said, "Here's all these great plans I want you to do," and he said, "Okay, let's do it." Noah's obedience came from a strong faith, a strong foundation, an authentic relationship with the Lord that he had close to him each and every day. And so when a command came down from the Lord, it was simple. Even though it seemed crazy and wild to everyone else, Noah didn't doubt, because his obedience came from that strong faith that he had in the Lord. So, sometimes we can kind of make our relationship with God and faith something pretty complex, but the lesson of Noah here in these chapters reminds us of a powerful simplicity of what it means to be in relationship with the Lord and to be walking with Him and obeying Him. And in turn, God blesses us. God blessed Noah for obeying his, what seemed to everyone else, absurd plans by letting him be the man who gets to start the new world and saved his entire family from this flood. So that's what I want to take away from the story of Noah today. It's not the cool part about the animals or how long the flood lasted, how amazing the ark was. All those things are cool, and I'm sure there's lots of stuff you could take from that. But I think the overarching theme that surrounds the entire story of Noah and the ark is his faith and his obedience in the Lord, and how simple it was for him to follow him and to do what he knew he needed to do because he trusted in the Lord. And so, as we look ahead to the rest of the summer and the fun things that we're going to do and the blessings that come from doing those fun things, we get to spend so much time out in God's creation with all the activities we're busy with. It's important for us to remember just that simple lesson that Noah leaves with us, is that the greatest blessings come from those who trust and obey and have a daily walk with the Lord. If you do those things, if you have a strong foundation, an authentic relationship with the Lord and a faith in Him, and you obey His commands because they're easy, because you have that strong faith and relationship with Him, you're going to see yourself become blessed because of it, and God is going to love to shower His blessings on your life. So that's very simply kind of what I want to take from Noah today. So let's pray and we'll wrap it up. God, thank you for what you teach us, and how we can open up the Bible and find story after story and lesson after lesson, and to close it and come back to it and find new stories and new lessons. Your word is alive and it teaches us things, Lord, and it helps us to know how to live. And so I thank you for the example that Noah set for us on how to live and how just to walk in simple obedience with you, God, and how that obedience doesn't just come randomly. It comes out of a strong faith with you and a strong relationship with you. And so help us throughout this week as we seek to have a strong relationship with you, God. And if we don't have that strong relationship with you, God, give us that desire to do that and a desire to obey what you want us to do. And we pray this in your name. Amen. Thanks for joining us, everybody. Have a great week.